Hello friends, today we'll see ReactJS with Redux. Today in this lecture I will show only the basics, but in the next lecture we will complete it with Redux. So now what is React? React is a JavaScript library which is based on ECMA script 6 edition to generate error-free, reusable components for building aesthetic graphical user interfaces. So the backend is written in Node.js and the front end is written in React.js. So ReactJS was invented in 2011 by Facebook, and currently many websites are using ReactJS for their applications. So now, what is the components of React? So components of React are state and props. So when you run, first let me go to the Ubuntu terminal. So I will just open this Ubuntu terminal. I will maximize this, and now I will just write npx. First I will install Node. To install Node, I will write sudo apt get install Node.js. So it will automatically install. So for this is for Ubuntu. So when Node.js installs, it automatically installs npm. The npm is a Node package manager. That is like a composer for Laravel. The Node is for sorry, npm is for Node. So if I type this command, it will ask me for my password, and after I give it the superuser password, it will install Node.js and npm. So now after installing, you can check Node minus v, that is I will and then npm minus version is this. So this is I have successfully installed Node.js and Node and npm. So now to create a React app, you just type npx space create hyphen react hyphen app, and after that you write the name of that, that is tutorials. So what will happen is it will create the app in the tutorials. So you see, so this is coming, it is installing packages, and this may take us some time. So in the meanwhile we will go to the concept. So now we have executed this file. Just look at the cursor and npx create react app. This create react app is the package which creates a basic default react app. So just note it down somewhere that so create react app. So after create app is created, a node underscore modules folder will be created in the root directory, and will contain all the binary executable versions of all the packages that are required by Node.js and npm to create a React.js application. So the package dependency is stored in package hyphen log.json and package.json in JSON format. So that JSON format will be passed on all the required packages that are dependent on one another are installed using these two files. So we have a node modules contains all the executables, and package.json and package hyphen log.json contain all the files which are the hierarchy structure of the dependencies. So now after this we will go to Docker file. So now we are, I think, ready for the still installing. Okay. So we'll this was now we will see the Docker file. So in the Docker file there are commands. So whenever your application is deployed to the server, this Docker file is run. So the first is from. So you it tells the Docker to tell Node 11 version of Node. Then we use change the present working directory to ReactDB. Then we copy the package hierarchy to ReactDB. Then we run this command npm install. So what it does is it just runs all the dependencies and installs all the packages. And npm run build builds the packages. And then we copy the packages which are built which, to again to the our project folder. So and then we will run this command in production. So the basic thing is we have to go to that directory, then copy the package .json file to the directory, then install all the packages with the dependencies, and then run the in build, run the application in build, and then copy the our build file to react. Final step is in production, the npm run production. That was about the Docker file. So git ignore is a hidden file, and an env file is a hidden file. So env file contains all the environment variables. In name is equal to value, key is equal to value pair. Each key is equal to value pair should be on the separate line. So what is git ignore? Git ignore is the set of files which do not have to be checked for updation in the git command. So I don't want these node modules to be uploaded to the server. These are local to my server. It may be production, development, or the staging server. It is private to that server. It is not. It should be ignored by Git. So we have seen env git docker file. Readme file is just description, and another server side. So we use Express server. So it listens at 33014 port, and for each GET request, it will just send the join the directory name and build a path and send it to index.html. So that was server.js file. So now we'll see if yes, it has started. So now we'll just write npm start, npm start. So now we'll just go to the directory. After going to the directory, we will write npm start. So it has started. So it is starting the development server on port 300. So you can see this is our first React application that we have built. So now we will see uh, to how we will develop this further. So here in the source folder, all the logic is there. If we go to there, in this source folder, all the logic is there. And public folder is just for which are in the public. So our main is source. So source it contains of the main file is the index.js file. So in this, what happens is this file is run by the server when first it encounters wants to deploy that. This is very important file, and it contains uh, uh, the React and the React DOM components from the React and React slash DOM. So these two lines like this repack. So which is the import React from React. So and then import import from React DOM. So these two files are components are required, and then you need a service worker which will work in the background. So So I'm just importing this star. I'm importing all the packages from the service worker component from the service worker JavaScript file. Service worker. So this is our okay. So it's not JS file. So these are main three steps that are the first three steps for building an application. So you need to import the React from React, then the React DOM from the React DOM, and a service worker. So what is the React and React here? So React is based on components. Components are class components or functional components that return some value. And then that value is returned using the virtual DOM. So everybody knows what is the DOM, just document object model. So instead or having the whole document object model in the memory every time, what it does is creates a virtual DOM first, the first step, and then it looks for the changes, which elements are changed and which elements do not have to be changed, and it just changes those elements which are it just changes those elements without touching the other part. So that is virtual DOM. Means it is not the actual DOM, but whenever it listens for changes. Whenever it is changed, the React apps will figure out what the changes and will update only that in the main DOM. So that IO IO is you can say minimized and throughput is increased. So now we learned about the first three import statements. So imported React from this React pack and Pim package, and I imported React UM from this React slash UM package, and so on service worker that will run in the background. So now here, yeah. So now we are in React.dm. So here we will React copy React UM. So React UM dot render. So render function is called from that React UM component, and render inside what to render is the JSX. So this is a JSX component. This is JSX syntax. It's not JavaScript. So this is JSX, and you can have HTML elements as expressions or components as expressions. So declaration of components, variables, and expressions, and where to put it is the in the document.get element by ID root. So there is a file. Yeah, so document.get element ID root. So where is this file? So this file is in app.js. So in this app.js, I have the, hello friends, welcome back. Today we'll see how to state and props. So I have made a simple paragraph for this. So a React JS component, like whatever it may be a class or a functional component, it contains two variables as default. So these variables are objects. So the first variable is called as state and the other variable is called as props. So state is private to each instance of the component. So suppose I have a component named animal and I have 10 instances of animals, one for suppose dog, one for cat. So each of these instances will have its own state and it can be modified. So what happens when a state is modified? A state contains properties, methods, closures, integers, JSON data, and can contain any type of data and can be stored as properties. Also, functions and lambda functions can be stored as properties, and lambda functions can take any number of arguments. So that is what is state. So what is the current state is dependent on the view. So what we are doing is we are just coupling the view with the data. So and using the code reusability of components. So suppose now I have 10. I have you can say 10 animals, and let me write. So in this I have animal tag, and name is equal to dog. So what it will do is it will create an instance in memory of that animal or in the virtual DOM, and whenever I will any class will extend this class, it will have the props as name. So suppose if class dog extends animal, then what will happen is this dot props dot name will be accessible. So for this is a basic example. So it will be dog. So this is just a basic. But suppose I have you can say three animals. Let me. So now in these three animals, yeah. So now in these three animals, there will be three uh, instances of the different instances will be stored in the DOM, and each instance will have its own state. Each instance will have its own props, and the props generated that are got from the parent and grandparent components. So this is about one. So the thing is that the state is updated whenever I update my dog's name from ABC to XYZ. So what will happen is the entire component will be re-rendered. That is the render function will be automatically called. So this is about a state. States are mutable, but it are not accessible outside of the class. You can set the the state proper object using set state this dot set state function. In this set state function, I will have an object as a argument, and then I will just write that name goat, and then comma age 30. So what this will do is it will call the set state function, and it will continue the remaining code. So this set state function is an asynchronous function, and it runs in the background, and it changes the state. So there is one more method to change state, but that is only in the constructor. So what is a constructor? A constructor is a function which is called whenever the object is encountered, whenever the tag, the element is encountered in the render function. So I am in the render function, and I am typed animal name is equal to dog. So whenever animal name is equal to dog is encountered, the constructor function is called. The syntax is underscore underscore construct. So inside that, the first line should be super. So what super just calls the parent class constructor. But if you it is not a mandatory, it can be neglected also. But if it is used, it should be in the first line of the constructor function. So after writing the super, we will write this dot state is equal to this is valid, but this dot state is not valid outside of the constructor function. And inside the constructor function, the first line if it is there, then it should be super. And now initialization of variables. Initialization of static functions. Wait a minute. Initialization of static functions, static methods, sorry, and variables and instance variables and uh, lambda lambda functions and binding of function. So here, what in construct function, you can initialize static methods, static variables, instance variables, and lambda functions also. Lambda, that is arrow functions, and binding of functions. So you bind this to a particular function. So when you're calling that function, that this will bound to that the object which calls the function. So you can write it like this: this dot set name is equal to this this dot set name is equal to this dot set name dot bind this. So this dot set name is the name of the function, and what is it is doing is binding the this operator to the set name function. So whenever you call this set name function, then this reference will be there. But without this, you have to use arrow functions. So if you don't want to write this tedious code, then I will write arrow functions. So what I will do is I will use set name. I will just take the name as argument and this arrow and then this block of code, whatever you want. So you can use this in this. These are some of the basics about state. But just remember that whenever the state is changed, a virtual DOM is updated, and this virtual DOM is sent to the is combined again is just there in the memory. So after the whole virtual DOM functions have been done, then then it stores the virtual DOM changes into the permanent DOM, and in the permanent DOM the component is re-rendered. So now this was about state. So props. Props are properties that are sent from one parent to another to his children. So suppose I have a class called animal, and I have three subclasses called dog, cat, and fox. So what I want to do is I was want to suppose for you can say I have now animal class. So now what I will do is dog. So dog class is there, and in that there is parent class. So if I write class dog extends animal, so this what will happen is it will get all the in the if you write this dot props, it will it will contain a name prop, and this dot props dot name will return dog. So that is the prop. So you can pass props from parent to child. You can pass functions as props. Suppose there is a function like func. Func is equal to expression. Uh, React. So what will it do is it will suppose I want to run this function. I will write this dot props dot react function. So react is already available because it is an inheritance. So after this, yeah, this was all about props. So what are the generic props? Generic props are props which are available to every component. So generic props are props to every component. So this dot props dot history maintains the history of components visited, components encounters. Then this dot props dot children returns an array of the of its child components. So these are the two uh, you can say uh, two main uh, properties are available to all the children. So now, how to how to use these props? So for this we need to understand first what are functional components. Like class components, functional components take a value and take a props, and then they create a generic button on the generic like in Bootstrap there are classes. So the same way the functional components just provide a function, and there can be n number of functional components. It takes props as its argument and it performs functioning on the props. So I will show you an example in the source folder. Here, every component class has to be export default, and it should extend component. So now there it is, yeah, that is true. Hello friends, now we will continue with our theoretical concepts. Now we have studied about state props, component, class components, and functional components. So now we will see at this snippet that I have written. Suppose I am passing two objects O1 and O2 from one component to other, parent component to child component. So O1 is the object that has sent, and its value is V1 variable, and O2's value is V2. So here the parent component I have closed. So now I'm here, and O2 and O2 are accessed in the child component as this dot props dot O1 and this dot props dot O2. To create code usability and prevent error propagation, using functional components which take one or more arguments as props. So to define the three buttons, use the same set of code. So this is functional component. Functional component name is button. It will get some props from its parent component, and that props will have a color property. So that will change it to this expression will change return the color. So if now this was about our functional components. So now we will move further to life cycle. So we have component state and props. We have components. Then props and functional components. Now we will see the life cycle method. So component will mount. This method is called just before the render function is called. So render function just whenever the virtual DOM has been passed, this function is called. This function you can use to bind the um, objects to its functions, to initialize some constructor variables, to create event listeners, event handlers. Component second is the component did mount. So component did mount is called immediately after the whole render function is executed. Now render function can be executed whenever the state changes, whenever the user closes the page, whenever the props are like getting, whenever there is inheritance change, whenever there is any other hardware or software change, then render is called. And when render is called, and the render is called whenever the state changes. So when render is called, uh, just after render function is executed, component did mount function will be executed. Now component will amount. So suppose the virtual DRAM has been converted to the normal DRAM and the application exists exiting. That time component will unknown will just be called just before. That is the last step before the virtual DRAM work is over. So component date update is called whenever the state of the object is changed. So yeah, that was about React. And yeah, there is one more thing that component will receive props. So whenever the parent component sends the props to the child component, this that function is called as, I will just write it here. The name of the function which is called is uh, component will receive props. This function will this function will take a props and will execute a function. This is a lambda function. This is a lifecycle method. Arrow function, so we know. Now, what is XGS? XGS is a library to make AJAX calls, and you can see I have imported XGS from XGS and not npm. So I have just used get request. I just use XGS.get method URL and data. Form CLS will just JSON converted data into string, and I will pass this data using post, and then I will get a response. So now validation. So validation is client side is very useful. So to validate, I use a formic library, which is very important. And the constraints uh, are demonstrated in the yup library. So yup library has an uh, object method. So yup object method will have a shape method. So inside that shape method, I will pass all the rules. So username is yup dot string, means it should be string and it is required. And if it is not there, you print username is required, comma. Then after that password, yup dot string. So it should be a string, and that is required. And if it is not that, password is required is printed. Then in the return, there I have in the there is a fragment tag. Fragment is a container. In that fragment, there is forming tag. So initial values are based on the initial state. So initial state is username is blank and password is blank. That is the initial state. After that, on submit, what I will do is I will take values and actions. So values based are based on name. So and validation schema is the user schema using built using yup. So I will take the props and I will just create a form, and I will just create a field component, and which and on change means what function to call and what is its value. So for its value is stored in props dot values dot username. So suppose I have an input field with the name is equal to username and HTML. It will be props dot values dot username, and then on change means whenever it is changed, it will tell props dot handle change input. So now it is a formic library. So you can see here in the reset button, I am just props dot reset. I'm calling this reset function is built in to props dot initial values. So this line resets the form, and on the click of reset, so there is one more give uh, there is one more errors like that. So props dot errors dot password will check for the error, and if the error is present and the user has touched the password, it will send the error message for password. So that was yeah, that was about yup and for me. So first is create a schema, create an initial state, like username is blank, password is blank, then import yup from yup package. So after importing, you just use yup dot object. So it will create object of type yup, and I will just shape it as username should be a yup dot string dot required, and password is yup dot string dot required. So both username and password are required. So forming, you have to now where how to which tag to use. So the root element is fragment, and after the root there will be forming. So now the properties of the forming are props.errors. So a form field name. Suppose my name of my field is UN. So props.errors.un specifies if it is errors or not. Prop.touch.un specifies if it has been focused. It has been at cursor has been pointed to that. Props.value is a current value. Props.dirty is you have entered a value before and you have changed the value. And props dot is submitting is the form field name. So if it has clicked on the submit button, this function will return true. Props dot reset, I told you that it will reset the values to the initial values, and initial values are uh, the blank. So you can see you can use this one pattern for matching pin code is in slashes. It should be a default digit, start with a digit of 6 characters and end. So that is a regex that is used. Then you can have logical operations. Suppose I want either religion or gender. So I will write props dot values dot religion or props dot values dot age. So or we can use and we can use. So all this is in first the steps are initialize the state, then using set the validation rules, and then in the fragment forming tag you just yeah forming tag you just specify the initial values, the on submit handler and the validation schema. So every format tag has the props that is given to it. So that props I will write the lambda function. Like this is the props, and in this props this is the JSX. So you can see the reset props dot reset is equal to values, and values is reset form. So inside this fragment tag, inside this formic tag, there is for each form control there is a field tag. So the component is input, so it is an input tag. So it is a placeholder, it is a class name, it is the ID, it is the value is stored in props dot values dot name, and props dot errors dot name is just was the error message, and props dot touch dot username specifies if it has changed pampered, it has been focus brought into focus or not. So just remember the component on change name, value, placeholder, class name, and ID. So this was about validation. So now we will see. Hello friends, continuing from my previous lecture. There are two types of React components uh, which we will discuss. The first is the component class, and second is the functional component. So in component class, you just extend uh, uh, the component class which is already available. But as you can see in this image, it is function attribute. It is a functional component. All functional components have a function as the keyword. So there are some rules that have to be followed using uh, React JSX. So the rules are first is every JSX every JSX code snippet should have a root element. It can be empty also. Right. So suppose I'm returning from my render function. So in that render function, I have two. I have a div tag. I have a image tag but this will give me syntax error. So because there is no root element, so for that I will just say this close, and so this is our root element. Or if you want to just make it easier for the other developers to understand, you write react.element and react dot, sorry, not element, react dot fragment, sorry, react dot fragment and close react dot fragment, but you need to import react for that. So that was one rule, and all JSX expressions must be in the double curly braces. And if you want to give styles, then it should be in double curly braces. So style, because it accesses uh, the arguments are s, and so the first thing is border radius, so it should be camel case. All the CSS properties should be written in camel case, so to 20 pixels. And now comma. Now how will you write class name? So this is style. So suppose I want to write some class name, but class already a keyword in JSX. So I will use the class name. So class name, the word we use, and for a name, that is for label, for the label type which denotes the, you connect the input element. So these are the these are the JSX syntax. So now the what more restrictions JSX provides. So what is allowed, what is not allowed. So we'll just see one by one. So now you can see const. Const will write my first snippet, and in that I will write JSX code. Hello world, and I will close the header. So this is a JSX expression, and what and I can write now const details is equal to document dot, no sorry, not it, no document, hello us. I'm just concatenating them, and this is my snippet. So now we have done the practical thing, done the theoretical thing. Now we will do the practical thing. So now we will create a simple application. Now let me go to the new terminal. In that new terminal, let me maximize it.